cookies they ordered.
Yo, this is Trav, and once again, we're here with the college football review. We came on a little late, and I'm talking about a couple of weeks late, only because we started the show this time around, not in 0 week and not in week one, the first full week of college football. So we did it after this week that just passed, and we saw some of the upsets that had happened. Even though last week there were a lot more upsets, a lot more games of intrigue, more competitive games, this week at least tried to follow up, and we were able to find one of the upsets, if you want to call it that, a 17.5-point favorite in the Florida Gators in the Swamp playing against the Bulls of South Florida. One of those interstate rivalries. Well, is it really a rivalry? It just happens to be both states in the state of Florida. But before we go through that, as you may know, I'm Trav, and that's Dime Ski. We're going to try to do this show for about a half hour after the games and let you know what happened throughout the course of the college football season. So, Diamond, what do you have to say to the people out there? Introduce yourself.
What's going on, people? Let me reach into my sports bag. Yeah, I want y'all to know that it was an exciting, a lot of good defense. I was surprised the top games that I watched. There was some good defense going on. It was competitive football, not like them blowouts in Alabama and other states over there.
Yeah, a whole bunch of other games were blowouts. And while I was one of those suckers who decided to bet on one of these games, and I thought Texas Tech would be the way to go, and they would have been the way to go if Kent State didn't score 14 points. They scored 7 points too many. I went in there with a 48.5-point favorite. Of course, if you're a real gambler, you don't touch games like that. That's stupid. But I wanted to be stupid, and guess what? You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And in this case, I won nothing. I lost a bet, so let's move on. This college football week was different than last week, as I've already explained. Last week we had competitive games. You talked about Miami playing Notre Dame down in Miami. And Miami, well, is that really an upset? They were a 2.5, 3.5-point underdog. They were able to win. In fact, they were dominant up until they started playing not to lose rather than continue to put their foot on Notre Dame's neck and show that they are the new dogs on the block, because last year's Miami team became pretty fraudulent as the season went on. Then, of course, last week we had Alabama getting upset, a true upset against the Florida State Seminoles in Tallahassee. Things have changed with Florida State coming off of a 2-win season last season. Alabama angry because they didn't get into the playoffs last year with first-year coach Kellen DeBoer coming from Washington, and things seem to be getting worse for him. A $70 million buyout if the Crimson Tide want him out of there. That may be a possibility the way things are going right now. This week, another upset. Another Florida team upset by a Florida team that upset a Boise team last week. The University of South Florida goes into Gainesville, the Swamp, and it's a slugfest. Take the under, and they pull it off with a last-second field goal of 19 yards by Nico Grammatica, the son of the infamous, I don't know if he's infamous. Come on, I thought it just rolled off. Martin Grammatica, only because he hurt his knee after he made that kick one time when he was with the Bucks, blah, blah, blah. But yes, the kicking Grammaticas. You had Martin, you had Bill. Now you have little Nico kicking for the Bulls of South Florida, kicked their way to a win yesterday, an upset win yesterday against Florida.
Yeah, he's trying to be the new Automatica, but we'll see if he'll be the new Automatica. But it's good to see he keeping it in the family business. It's all in the family business with the legs over there with the Grammaticas.
But more importantly, what about Florida losing in Gainesville to a team they were supposed to not lose to? Billy Napier now, because of that loss, back on the hot seat after last year, starting off with a rocky start. He had Graham Mertz, who came down from Wisconsin to be his quarterback. He did get DJ Lagway, the player of the year in Texas, and then he comes to Florida with a lot of promise, but then now a lot of injuries. And now in this season, it was supposed to be the season in which they catapulted themselves back on the national scene, a 13th ranked team, which Florida is, and this happens. Now, it's either one of two things. Florida is going down the drain again and they hadn't gotten any better, or South Florida is really that good because last week they did beat Boise State. And not only did they beat them, a team that went to the playoffs last year, no Ashton Genty this year, but they blew them out down in South Florida.
Yeah, South Florida looked like a solid team. I think they're on the rise. You know what I mean? Like they probably caught on Florida by surprise, but it was some hard running in that game and some good moves by that quarterback for South Florida.
Yeah, Byron Brown, last season, he was the one who gave Alabama a lot of problems. And even though they did lose the game, they put up a hell of a fight. And it really put people on notice about the team. I think they believe South Florida could be if everything goes their way. So far, so good now. Now at 2-0, and a game coming up now in Miami against the Canes. They may just be the new kid on the block when it comes down to these Florida teams. You have Florida State, you have Florida, and you have Miami. It used to be the big three, but then of late in the past 10, 15 years, Central Florida has done some things, including going undefeated one season and believing they should have been national championships along with Alabama, if not in front of Alabama, because they were the team that beat the team that beat the team. They beat Auburn. They beat Auburn. Auburn beat Alabama, but then Alabama won a national championship because they are from the SEC, won the SEC, and got in. But anyways, it's just the way college football is going right now. It's just, I don't know. This USF team seems like they do have it. And I think Byron Brown, obviously at quarterback, he does the passing, he does the running. He's an athletic player. Did get injured last season, so that's when they kind of went on a bit of a swoon. He's back now, and they're taking receipts. Now, is that just overall recruiting and the way they do things at South Florida, or the new way they're doing things at South Florida, or is this just the way college football is right now? Go into the transfer portal, find your players, instantly get them good, get your team on track if they hadn't been on track. If they were off track, now they're back on track. Is it one of those deals?
It looks like for me, the portal. I've been as I'm watching and listening. The portal has aided all these teams today. So there's a lot of teams, Drew, that's up on the uprise just because there's a 5-star that went somewhere and he's not getting what he was promised, or it's not coming soon enough. And if you don't get it fast enough, he goes into the portal, and he takes his skills to the next buyer. So the portal has helped a lot. You know what I mean? It's like a new a subdivision of recruiting. You know what I mean? You don't even got to recruit, because you know what I'm saying, if you going to play them, they gone. They like, you're not playing me, I'm out of here. And some guys do it like if the NIL money ain't right. So do the NIL and playing time, kids can move wherever they want, and it's making college a little bit more competitive. It's
Yeah, well,
especially for the big name teams.
it's becoming a lot more competitive. Teams that wouldn't have had a chance in the past somehow have a chance now. I mean, look at UNLV last season. They hadn't made a name for themselves in years, hadn't gone undefeated in a long time. In fact, I believe the last time they had their entire season in which they went undefeated, Ron Meyer was coaching them back in the 70s, and they played in the Glass Bowl. So that was way back in the day. Things have obviously changed. But UNLV was one of those teams that benefited last year for having NIL players or transfer portal players. I think there's been a litany of teams that have been successful because of those teams. I think going back to, not even going back to, but speaking on someone like Dabo Swinney, who tries not to go in the portal because he wants to prove to these recruits' parents that he really believes in the kids that he goes to recruit. And as noble as that may sound, it may not be the way to go about college football today when everyone else is doing the newest thing that's going on, getting these players, recruiting these players, being aggressive, getting them a second and third time around. They come to your school, you're successful instantly. Dabo Swinney's still doing it the old way, and we're looking now, the team that he has already beaten up by LSU, not looking so good himself this past weekend as well. So he's going to have to get on board. But that goes throughout all of college football, where teams can instantly get it together. Even a traditionally great team like Florida State, coming off of a 2-win season, now 2-0, even though I think East Texas A&M yesterday was an absolute blowout. But I'm thinking that there's no doubt about it. And to look at the recruiting part of it. And that's what I'm talking about when it comes to the contracts. So in addition to signing your letter of intent, which is a grant and aid, you're also signing a contract. There have been players, especially down in Texas Tech, signing a $5 million contract in the class of 2026. Now they also got, I believe, the second or first best linebacker in the country. I don't know what his numbers are, but I'm hearing somewhere around $3 million. So that's what we're talking about now. Not quasi-professionals. These are professionals just on a lower level. But yeah, looking at South Florida.
They're the true semi-pros.
True semi-pro. They are getting paid. And you know what? And there's a few ways you can look at it. And in terms of what does it do for the kid, you always want to, at least people try to be politically correct. If they're not trying to be correct at all, they talk about we want what's best for the kid. Well, in some of these instances, you get a kid a $2 or $3 million contract, and he's a great college player, but probably doesn't project to be a great pro player. We've seen that before. It's a benefit if they're doing the right thing with that money as it comes. When you may not be a first-round draft pick. Quentin Ewers, who's in the NFL now, wasn't taken in the first round or the second round or the third round, but coming out of high school, everybody wanted him. So lock in that bag, I guess. It's beneficial for the kid. So when things don't work out, you have something to fall back on. I'm thinking that's what it would have been. But Florida, once again, losing to South Florida. But I think in addition to Florida losing to South Florida and Billy Napier now really being on the hot seat, it was lukewarm going into the season. Now it's back on hot. There were some games, even though if they were blowout to the eye, according to Vegas, they weren't as big a blowout. And it's like Georgia playing Austin Peay. And I understand it's hard getting up for games like that. And it's, you're playing pretty much to have fun because you can against the lesser teams, but also not to get hurt. So the score is not really indicative of the talent. But for that day, if you could just lay back and just protect yourself, you do it against a team like that.
Yeah. Like you said, Sweet Dabo better get with it because it's actually the same way recruiting he feels was for him as being old school. He has to realize that the portal is part of recruiting now. So he shouldn't look at it as as a negative. He should just look at it as like this is a new aspect to recruiting, and if the kids he's using work, then there'd be no reason for them to be replaced. You know what I mean? And then the kids, if like the kids who in the portal, if those kids get feel a little disgruntled, they can be out. I guess if he shakes the father's and mother's hand and look them in the eye and says and gives them a promise, I guess he wants to keep it. But it's a lot. It's a lot out here, and yeah, you got to watch it playing these smaller schools because these guys want to make it. The smaller schools want to make a name for themselves too. So if they can get a good hit on somebody, they're gonna lay the wood. So, and then unfortunately, as we know, as violent as football can be, one of your good players can be done for the season or a couple of weeks or out for that big game that you need them for. So we're looking forward to you got to try to keep it safe while you playing these smaller schools. You got to come up with a good game plan, I guess, like how people do for preseason to keep your stars safe from dumb injuries or just a kid trying to make his name for himself.
Well, you do want to put some players out there, give them a chance to get some movement, and maybe not for an entire quarter, maybe not for even a half, just some time just to be out there so their body can go through at least a routine so it's not so rusty the following week. And I remember some of those instances several years ago for that matter, when Oklahoma State played Savannah State, and Savannah State was absolutely blown out. I think it was nearly 60 points or even more than that. And before the end of the game, one of the Savannah State players hit the Oklahoma State receiver and injured him for the season. I think it was a torn ACL. It was insane. But that's what I think Savannah State was going on a little blood money tour. They were just going to any school that was going to pay them the money because it helped their program now. They were in dire straits financially at the time. Now they're not in dire straits as much now because they had that, what I called at the time, blood money, because they also played Florida State at the time. And I believe that game was one of the largest spreads, if not the largest spread in college football history, of over 70 points. They should have just taken it off the board, but it should have,
Wow.
it was over 70 points. Florida State was favored, and of course they dominated them as they should have. But Dabo Swinney, going back to that, it's a pride thing. Some of these old dog coaches, you can't tell them anything. If they have it in their head, if that's what they're going to stand on, they're going to stay 10 toes down, like everyone says now, and they're going to be stubborn about it. Dabo seems to be stubborn about it. He's gone into the living room. He's told the mother, the father, the mother and father, the grandmother, or whoever the guardian is, I'm going to take care of your kid. I'm going to give them every opportunity to not only be a great football player, but to be a great student and a great person and something to society. That's the kind of guy he is. And then this kid comes in, probably doesn't play as well as expected, and you just replace him with someone off the street because, okay, let's push this guy to the side. Then all of a sudden you look bad to the parent or the guardian, and he doesn't like to do that. So I think he has gone into the portal now for the first time, I believe. And it's still different. He's not doing it in the droves. You have to do it to be successful and keep up with the players that are, or the teams and coaches who are doing it now. Georgia doesn't dip completely into the portal, but their team is made up of top prospects. Those prospects don't always work out, but typically if you have 5-star players backing up 5-star players, it doesn't. A lot of times, those 5-star players are legitimate 5-star players. Every now and then,
Yeah, it's not too much of a drop off.
there's not much of a drop off, and sometimes they just aren't living up to 5-star status. We've seen that before. There's a kid named Whitney Lewis I bring up every time I talk about this. St. Bonaventure High School out in California, and in Ventura, California. Lorenzo Booker's cousin, Lorenzo Booker, being the first person to announce his college choice on air ESPN when he went to Florida State. Turned down Notre Dame. His cousin, Whitney Lewis, 1,000 yards receiving, 1,000 yards rushing in his senior year. This is the type of talent he had. 6 feet tall, 215 pounds, 4.35 40, 1 to 100 meters. Also played basketball. Absolute phenomenal. But then his mom didn't want him to go to Florida State with Lorenzo, so he stays at Southern California. They find out he has dyslexia, a lot of other issues. He gained weight. Next thing you know, he's transferred to Northern Iowa, and he's pretty ordinary there, averaging 4.55 yards a carry. But anyway, I'm just bringing you down a rabbit hole how it can go for a 5-star player. But other teams out there, yesterday when I was watching these games, I'm dating this because it will be played on Monday, but watching these games yesterday and Florida obviously being the biggest news and the biggest upset with so much at stake, considering South Florida wasn't unranked, I don't believe, after the Boise State game. I think they did move up, but
yeah, they still weren't ranked.
They still probably weren't ranked, but now they're beating Florida, number 13, so they will be ranked. And now they're going to Miami on Saturday, playing in Miami, and Miami better have their eyes open because they are part of one of those games I'm talking about. Even though the score looked nice, even though the score was kind of a blowout, it could have been a lot worse, but I don't know what Miami was doing, whether they just saved the best for next week or they just, Carson Beck was in there, so it wasn't like they were just trying to go through the motions. They got him his playing time. And Malachi Tony, the new star of the Canes, true freshman out of Heritage High School at 17 years old, lighting it up again like he did last week against Notre Dame. Ruben Bain and all those defensive studs they have, those guys you would think would be absolutely overwhelming, and they were when they were out there, but I know I'm asking for too much. I'm looking for a 60 spot. They put up a 45 spot or somewhere in the 40s, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And then sometimes when I watch the game, making a lot of mistakes that aren't going to fly against top-notch teams, or even a team like in South Florida, who we may not know or may know could be one of those top-notch teams, if only for this year.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, they probably sharpening their horns out there in South Florida for them. they're gonna have storks. They're gonna be sparing storks, boy. It's gonna be. I mean, I like to see that. I'm ready to see that South Florida Miami game, because just to see, that's gonna prove how legit they are. If they can finish off another Florida team, it's gonna make them. It's gonna look good on their resume.
Of course, Miami's a AP top 5 team. They are number 5 right now. So if they can do that,
Oh my goodness, yeah.
and we remember, if you know South Florida's history, they have beaten Florida before. They've beaten Florida State before, and they've beaten Notre Dame on the road before. And that was back years ago, I think 2011 or somewhere around there, or 2010. They beat Notre Dame in Notre Dame when Coach Levitt was there. So that was Sam Barrington's true freshman year. I know that because he invited me to the game and I didn't go up to Notre Dame. But another story for another day. Let's move on
Another
to
day.
Georgia, another one of those teams. Last year they had the issues. Carson Beck, even though he only lost 3 games as a Bulldog, wasn't necessarily the quarterback that Stetson Bennett was, who had less talent but knew the system and played well as a collegiate player. And now Carson Beck finds himself down in Miami as their starting quarterback, as Gunnar Thornton takes over for the Georgia Bulldogs. And he took over last year when Carson did hurt his elbow and had elbow surgery in the offseason, so he couldn't even participate with the Miami Hurricanes during spring practice. In fact, he couldn't do anything until pretty much fall drills. So it was pretty much sight unseen with the Hurricanes up until we saw him against Notre Dame. But Georgia playing against Austin Peay and winning 28-6, I was expecting a little bit more, if not a lot more, against Austin Peay. And I do understand these players aren't interested. I understand these players see this game as they can't help but look down on a team. But still, is there more than meets the eye looking at this score and thinking about, okay, when SEC play starts and there are tougher teams, will they still be able to pull this off? Or is this a game that Gunnar Thornton had a chance to at least let his hands go and throw the ball and get more familiar than he was the week before or any time before that, and just continue his progress towards being a consistent starter?
Yeah, maybe I didn't get to see that game, too much of that game, but Austin Peay might have had some defense. Like I said, it brings something out of you when you play for a lesser team and you play against the top team. You want to make a name for yourself. So if it could be, I'll give Austin Peay a little credit. Maybe they defense held the lollygagness of the laziness or the laid backness of this game. The defense rose enough to keep them from getting to 70.
I don't know what, because games like that I typically don't watch, even though I don't mind the Georgia Bulldogs. I am a Cane fan. Hey, I go to Georgia Bulldog games, so it's not like it's sacrilegious to do so. But they did have 421 total yards against Austin Peay, and they kept Austin Peay to just 45 yards rushing. So they did put the clamps on him. It's just that it was done sloppily. I expected a few more big plays, and if I'm watching another game, I'm looking to be interfered with while watching that game because there was a big play made at another game. We interfered because there was an 80-yarder broken by somebody on Georgia. And for me, that Zachariah Branch, the transfer from USC, would be that player. I think that would blow it wide open. But that's what I'm looking for. I didn't get that, but you know what? In the grand scheme of things, a win is a win is a win. And you know how it goes. You watch college football long enough, and you know these kids take it relaxed, regardless of what coach says. And sometimes I think coach allows them to relax by kind of limiting the time they go out there. But in any event, there's other games like Penn State, even though they got a shutout. You know what? I look at it from a Vegas standpoint. If you can't cover what Vegas tells you to cover, you're probably falling short. They win 34-0, but Vegas had them as a over 30-point favorite in that game. So when Penn State didn't win against Florida International, by the way, and early on, it was a close game until later on, it wasn't as close anymore.
Oh man, it's these games, but like you said, they got to cover for Vegas. Vegas make the world go around. So they saying cover these scores. You're right. I think I agree with you. It's probably the intensity of the coach too. For bigger games, coaches are more intense, and then on lesser games, they're not so intense.
Yeah.
So and the kids feed off of it.
But you're trying to, as a coach, trying to prevent mediocrity. You're trying to keep focus. And if your focus is up and down, it's going to go down at the wrong time, even when you're trying to get up for a better team or conference play. You could play Northwestern, which is in the Big Ten, and you might get slipped up or tripped up. Northwestern had their own problems last season, off the field more so than on the field. But anyways, that's another story. But to think about what Penn State had done, 34 points when they were favored by 41 points, and then the game was close for the first half. It really was. In fact, if I could look at some of the stats, if I could find them, yeah, it was 10-0 at halftime. That's a struggle against a Florida International team that hasn't been good. They hadn't been good since Mario Cristobal was coaching over there. And now who's down in Miami after leaving Oregon? But yeah, and that's just seemed how it was. And I think more importantly, even though you might keep your head down or keep your hair down, they allowed 140 plus yards of rushing offense. That's always a sign to me, even if you're kind of relaxed, just your sheer talent should prevent that against a much lesser team. And you're at home.
Yeah. This they let's see if how consistent they'll be for the rest of the season. That'll be that's what we look forward to, the consistency after these small school games, to see if they're gonna uphold the domination that they've been known to bring to games.
Now we can move on to another game staying in the Big Ten, a game I thought a Big Ten and the SEC, which used to be the Big 12 for this particular team. Oklahoma, the Sooners at home, playing against a Michigan team. I thought that would be somewhat of a game of the week because they were two ranked teams. Michigan going down to Sooner country, and they lost 24-13. Oklahoma really has something to prove this year. I think Brent Venables, the coach, is on the hot seat. I don't think so. He is on the hot seat. And this win, I think, against a traditional team, like a historical team like Michigan, helps this season. Maybe more momentum would help. But going by the way I saw them do it, I think it's more of Michigan being pretty much that bad offensively than and last year they were not that great offensively, but their defense was outstanding. They had great defensive linemen. They had an excellent cornerback in Will Powers and Will Johnson. And they could rely on that defense as the offense ran the ball with Donovan Edwards, who the Jets ended up getting as a free agent. They were effective last year doing that. This year, not so much. And just as importantly, Brian Underwood is their quarterback now. Maybe a lot more talent looking forward and projecting at this moment, just growing pains. And we got a chance to see those growing pains yesterday, 9 of 24 for 142 yards going against this Oklahoma team. And Oklahoma pulls it off. I mean, kudos to them for being a Big Ten team. Everyone knows who follows college football. The Big Ten has won the last two national championships, even though the SEC still cries and complains. They're the best. Until you win again, you're not the best. Like that might be coming to an end this year based on what's in the SEC. And we're not talking about Alabama. We might not even be talking about Georgia, but LSU seems to be the team that's really putting a beating on players, teams. And Garrett Nussmeier, their quarterback.
Yeah, Nussmeier, crazy name.
I've been on his bandwagon for 3 seasons. I thought he was going to displace Jaden Daniels, who's now with the Washington Commanders in the NFL, second pick overall in the draft. But apparently, Jaden ended up being better than I thought. But Garrett is still there, being consistent, being efficient. And the last time I saw, he might be in the lead for the Heisman Trophy. Now, this is way too early to even talk about that. But just for the sake of argument and conversation, that's where he is right now. So, and speaking of LSU, another one of those teams that played a team closer than I would have liked or would have expected. They did play another interstate rival, I guess, team. We can't call it a rival just because they're there with them coexisting. It was 23-7. 23-7, so that's not a blowout, but I guess everything can't be a blowout. Sometimes, teams just play mediocre, but when they got to get it on, they get it on because LSU got it on against Clemson last week, gave them the beats.
LSU, yeah, that's Myers. Yeah, it's like LSU's becoming a quarterback factory. They got all the good guys coming out of there. You know what I'm saying? Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels, now Nussmeier. They killing it in LSU.
Well, yeah, they're killing at LSU right now, and it looks like they beat up on Clemson last week as well. I kind of went through some of these teams. Of course, this is the first week, so there's some kinks we got to work out. This is going to be the last couple of seconds of this show. Next week, we'll try to put it together a little bit more patchwork, a little bit more fluidity, and we'll get a chance to do that. I'm Trav, he's Dime Ski, and this is the college football review for the second week.
Review.
Next time, distances go.